What's up, guys? This is Andy, BC Builds. As you can see, here is a power supply and here is a tattoo machine. I forget who requested it, but someone asked me how I set up a line building liner, a sculpting liner, a hybrid liner. It's all really the same thing. Building lines is different than most other liners. When you're building a line, you're using your machine. Sorry, guys. And to create different thicknesses and lines, this is more of a new school thing with line building and sculpting lines. Say you want a thinner line here. Like say you're doing like a new school dragon. The lines of the belly where the scales are, you want to do a thin line, but the outline of the outside of it, you want to do a thicker line. Usually you would have to use two different size needles, or what I do is I use just a single pass liner. If I need to thicken a line in, I go back with just, when I'm coloring it in, before I go to color it, I'll just bring in my bag shader and, I just use the edge of it to thicken the line up. Basically just coloring off of it. That's how I was taught. Or another method of doing it is, with quite a few people use, is a sculpting liner. And basically what a sculpting liner is, it's pretty much the same thing as I guess like a gray wash shader. Unloaded, this runs around 115 cycles per second. And maybe 55% duty, somewhere around there. This is, hold on one second. This here is loaded. Loaded, it's got a 7 round in it. Usually I would use a 9 if I was really doing line building. So forgive me, I'm not too familiar with sculpting liners. I really don't use them. Like I said, if I do need to thicken the line up, I go back in there with a mag and turn it on its side. And just color quickly and thicken it up, like color off the line. That's how I was taught. Anyways, basically what a sculpting liner for is the purpose of using, you don't have to use a shader, you can build a liner just for that. When I do have to do that, which I do occasionally, I just use one of my shaders. Basically, you want a duty cycle anywhere from, 50 to 60. You don't want it spending too much time in the skin, because basically what you're doing when you're doing sculpting lines is you're putting one line down and then you're basically coming back and doing another line next to it to make it thicker, and you're overlapping them, just like you do when you're color packing. You color an area and then you overlap a little bit so there's no gap in color. Basically, you just really need a dumbed down liner that hits a little softer and isn't so fast. Because if you use a regular traditional liner, or a single pass liner like this, which, loaded runs around 125 cycles per second, and the duty's about 50, but it's pretty powerful. If you're doubling up on lines with this, you're going to scar somebody, just because these are small little needles. Overlapping with these needles can be very touchy because they cause a lot of trauma. So if you're, overlap with a normal liner, you're probably going to scar them because they're running so fast, they're hitting, in a certain spot, quite a few times a second, opposed to something that's not so much, and it's really powerful. A sculpting liner, this one runs loaded at 8.1 volts. I don't know if you guys will be able to see it. 96 cycles per second, or 96 hertz, and about 55% duty. That's how I would tune a sculpting liner. Then again, I don't really have many sculpting liners. When I do occasionally do it, I just use a shader. My shaders, unloaded, you want your sculpting liner to be around 50 to 55 hertz, and around 115 to 120 cycles per second. You don't really want a fast cycles per second on your sculpting liner, because you're going to be hitting the same spot way too many times per second. Basically, you don't want to tear them up. It's just, you're going to overwork the skin if you have a really fast liner and you're doubling it up. Because when you're, like I said, when you're building up lines, you're actually overlapping, so you're going to be hitting that same spot twice. So you want something that hits a little softer, so it's not going to seriously traumatize that skin on the overlap, and not pack too much color in and get blowouts and all that such. Especially you don't really want a really low duty cycle on a sculpting liner. Something I'll explain real quick. Duty cycle is basically the relation, of how long the circuit is open and closed. Duty cycle is not just limited to tattoo machines, but we're explaining them now. The duty cycle is basically, it tells you how long the needle's out of the tube and how long the needle's back in the tube. The lower the duty cycle means the longer it's out of the tube. And the higher duty cycle means the longer it's back up inside the tube. So with a higher duty cycle, this needle is going to be in the skin a lot less than it would be if it was a lower duty cycle. Now if you have a really low duty cycle, like 25%, this needle is going to spend, a mature 75% of the time in the skin, which is going to cause a lot of trauma. That's why, most artists and people tune their machines around 50 to 60 duty. So you're having your needle in the tube 50% of the time and then in the skin 50% of the time. Too high of a duty cycle, you're not getting enough ink saturation. That needle's not spending enough time in the skin, and you're not getting enough ink in there. Too low of a duty cycle, it means it's spending too much time in the skin. It's gonna cause blowouts. It's gonna cause a lot of trauma. It's gonna, you're gonna get caught up, and it's really just gonna tear the skin up. That's why the optimal duty cycle is 50%, around 50%. Every artist has, their own preferences, obviously. And I feel anywhere from 45 to 60 is the optimal range for most tattoo machines. My color packers, I like to run, around 47. My liners, just because the liners are hitting the skin so many times a second, I don't want that needle to be in the skin too much, so I like a little higher. My liners, I usually like 55 to 60. Duty cycle, just to keep that needle out of the skin a little more than normal, just because they're hitting that skin so rapidly in the same spot so many times. Because what people, tend to forget, everybody knows, but they're not thinking about it. To create a solid line, it's actually a bunch of dots that are overlapping. If you're going too fast, that needle's hitting that same spot too many times, and you get too much trauma. If your machine's running too slow, you're going to have, it's going to literally just be dot work, dot, 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 dot. You're going to see gaps in the line. Anyway, so when you're working with a sculptor liner that obviously runs slow like this, it runs slower and softer, you're going to have to adjust your hand speed. You're going to have to move a little slower, compared to a single pass liner where you got to be quick so you're not tearing up the skin. A sculpting liner, you would run a little slower just so you're getting basically a consistent dot of lines. I hopefully that explained that for you. Like I said, I'm not an expert on sculpting liners. This is just my personal opinion. This is how I use it. Then again, I only do it maybe, once every other month. I'll actually use a sculpting liner, or I'll actually build lines. Usually what I do to darken in and thicker lines, so this is my liner. I do a single pass line, and depends if there's a lot of line work I got to do. I don't want to wait too long to go back to it, because once it starts that healing process, if you hit it again, it's going to tear it up. But if it's a smaller piece and the line work only takes me, an hour, 2 hours at the max. Once I'm done with the line work, I'll grab my shader out, and basically I just, color right off that line, just if you were coloring, I would turn the mag sideways, so it's thinner. You could use the corner. There's a lot of ways to do it. The easier way, obviously, is to use the sculpting liner, because you can wait one line, and if it's not thick enough, you can just go back next to it, overlap a little bit, and do another line. Because it's running softer and not so fast, it's not going to tear up the skin. Like I said, I'm going to warn you again, if you try to do that with a fast single pass liner, you're going to scar up all that line work, and it's going to come out looking like braille when it's done. When I say that, it's going to be raised up. So, really a lot of this is trial and error. nobody says this, but the best way to tune a tattoo machine is while you're tattooing somebody. Either get one of your friends to come over and let you tattoo them for free or a discount, or one of your clients that come in, basically ask them, because it doesn't take that long to tune in a tattoo machine. Ask them, can I give you a free hour worth of tattooing if you let me tune the machine in on you? Basically tune it beforehand to think what you think it's going to work. Start working on them. If you notice the machine's running a little too slow, for your hand speed, you can adjust the contact screw, or, keep all your tools out, make sure they're clean, and take your gloves off during it so you don't cross-contaminate. But you can bend the back spring, give it a little more tension, make it a little quicker, and vice versa. If it's running a little fast for you, you can give it less tension, a little bigger of a gap. That's the best way to tune it, I don't always do it that way.